Good Sunday afternoon, AME Church. This is Editor John Thomas III welcoming you to another edition of the TCR Dialogues. Again, this is a special edition that we're doing anticipating our General Board. First, before we get to our main event, a few announcements. First and foremost, as you well know, the Supreme Court has recently, in the Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health Organization of Mississippi, overturned Roe v. Wade. We've gotten several questions about what exactly does the AME Church believe or not believe regarding Roe v. Wade and abortion. Well, yesterday, the Council of Bishops released a statement looking at the Supreme Court decision as looking at how it has created a public health emergency in the United States. Also, in May, the Health Commission released a statement about women's reproductive rights. And at the 2016 General Conference, one of our position papers specifically addressed the issue of abortion. Now, we understand that within our churches, within our communities and homes, there is a divide among this issue. However, we all can agree that the persons that will be affected the most by denial of reproductive rights, as well as maternal care, are poor women and African-American women, which is why the church is looking at this issue as what the repercussions can be regarding maternal health care and reproductive rights. And also the alarming post by Justice Thomas regarding that he wishes to go further into other rights that are under that due process clause. So for your information, tomorrow we will be emailing out again the Council of Bishops statement, along with the link to the Health Commission statement, as well as a link to the position paper from the 2016 General Conference that you can share for churches, what the AME Church has stated. Again, these are our thoughts on reproductive rights and what this means, understanding that we are divided on the issue of abortion, but we are not divided on the issue of care for mothers and the reproductive rights of women, and especially African-American women. Also, we know that this week is the General Board, and we are excited to tell you that we will be on site at the CME Church through our columnist, Brandon A.A.J. Davis. We are hoping to have one or two interviews with persons there. At the AME General Board, unfortunately, due to some technical difficulties, we will not be doing our customary interviews. However, there will be video coverage, and on July the 8th, we will do our interview with the President of the Council of Bishops, Ronnie Elijah Brailsford. So you'll see us there, but you'll hear us later on. But we are excited for this wonderful week in African Methodism and Black Methodism in general. So we hope that you'll keep up with the coverage. And now to our main event. Last month, Dr. Tyler and Doctors Tyler, I should say, Timothy Tyler and Nita Tyler hosted Raphael Warnock in their church through the Race Talks program. And Dr. Tyler and Senator Warnock are actually classmates from Morehouse. Classmates from ITC, I should say. I apologize for that. But we are excited to have this video presentation from them. And also, we do note that Senator Warnock will be in Atlanta at the General Board, and we'll give more information on that later on. But we wanted to share with you this special presentation with Dr. Tyler and Senator Warnock discussing his book coming up, and we hope that you will take a look at it, listen to it, and I'll come back later on with some more information with the General Board. Without further ado, we want to share this presentation with Dr. Timothy Eugene Tyler, Dr. Nita Tyler, and Senator Ralph Warnock on his upcoming book, and also reflections on American politics. So without further ado, we welcome this presentation.
Lord, it's good to have you here today. This is a wonderful occasion, and we are just extremely excited. I am the Reverend Dr. Timothy Tyler, the pastor, the very proud pastor of Shorter Community AME Church here in Denver, Colorado. And this is?
And I'm Dr. Nita Mosby Tyler, the proud First Lady of Shorter Community AME Church.
Come on, isn't she pretty? Yes. Just before we begin this race talk, we want to just do a few housekeeping matters. First and foremost, the Reverend Senator Dr. Raphael Warnock, I have to put it all in perspective now. His book is available out in the narthex. Please get a copy of the book. Immediately after this conversation, he will be signing your book It is a minimum cost of $28, and it is a wonderful memoir. We'll be talking about it today. So please get your copy now, and then we'll be ready to sign it immediately after this event. Just a few housekeeping matters. I believe we do have bottled water, and you're welcome to drink it in the sanctuary. So if you feel yourself getting super thirsty, feel free to get you some bottled water. Please, we want everybody to be safe and healthy.
He did really well without his glasses for 3 minutes.
But then I felt the Spirit of the Lord telling me to put your glasses on. First of all, we want to thank those who are here today serving and protecting us. Would you give a big hand to the Denver Police Department and let's thank them for making us feel safe. Yes. And then we want to thank the persons who have helped to make this event and other events possible. Would you help me thank, first of all, the Colorado Health Foundation, if you will? And would you help me thank the Rose Community Foundation? Give them a hand. And we want to thank Tattered Cover for making sure that I want you to know that the book comes out on the 14th, and it is not available yet anywhere. No one has the book. In fact, Senator Warnock called me yesterday because even he didn't have a copy of the book yet. And so you have it hot off. You have the first copies hot off the press anywhere in the nation or the world. Let's thank Tattered Cover for helping us with that. Yes. And then we want to talk about what Race Talk is. Race Talk began in 2017, right after the Charlottesville, Virginia uprising, or it was a riot actually. And Dr. Nita and I kind of looked at each other at the same time with a look of horror in our faces. And we wanted to begin a way in which we could have conversations about race and racism in our community that would be helpful and help others learn how to talk about race in a constructive way. And so I believe we have graduated 5 or 6 cohorts since our first Race Talk. Give that a hand. Yes. Many of you are here today who have gone through Race Talk University. And so today we are proud of what God has helped us to do. And so we welcome you today to this Race Talk University event where we will be having a great conversation with a great friend. Dr. Nita, anything you want to say before we get started?
Yeah, just really quickly, I would love if we have any elected officials or those that are seeking office, if you don't mind, stand so that we might acknowledge you.
Excellent.
Yes.
Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you.
Yes, and we want to encourage you to register to vote. You can do that today out in the narthex, I believe, at the desk. If you're not registered, you can get registered today with our social justice ministry. If you don't know if you're registered or not, you can check. They'll check for you to make sure that your name is on the roll. And so we want to encourage everyone to get registered. Let's vote. Let's participate in the process. At this time, it gives me just a lot of joy and honor to present our guest today. He is one of my good and closest friends. We have known each other for some 32 plus years. He was a freshman in college, and I was an upperclassman. I was an upperclassman at Morris Brown College, he at Morehouse College. And we just, because we were both going into ministry and we ended up in the same circles and we became fast friends. I have been appointed to 5 different churches in my lifetime. He has been at every one of them, and I have been blessed to be at many of his appointments, including Ebenezer Baptist Church, where he is the senior pastor, the spiritual home of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and he has done a great and mighty work at Ebenezer Baptist Church. And we are so thankful and grateful that he was elected the first African-American senator from the state of Georgia. Let me just stop right here. I'm going to pause for just a minute. I see our senator in the house. Stand up, Senator Hickenlooper. Would you just give Senator Hickenlooper a hand? Welcome, sir. Yes, we're grateful for your presence today. And so we're blessed. He doesn't do a lot of traveling right now because he's in the midst of a very contentious campaign. Yet, because he's my friend, I was able to beat up his campaign team and talk them into letting him come to Denver. And so let's bring him out now. Would you give a rousing Denver welcome to Senator Raphael Warnock? Come on. All right, we're going to have a conversation. It's a private conversation, Senator, with about 200 plus of my closest friends, yes. Now, don't y'all be nosy. Please don't eavesdrop. Mind your own business. But we're going to have a conversation. Dr. Nita, go right ahead.
Oh, yes. We love these intimate conversations with 200 of our closest friends. That's how Race Talk all got started. Senator Warnock, we're so thrilled to have you here. Welcome to the Mile High City, and we have lots of questions for you. First of all, I've been thinking a lot about this social climate that we're in, this time that we're in. I call it a hot mess, beautiful time to do some stuff. So I'm really interested in you sharing with the audience, what is this feeling like for you, and how do we inspire each other that even in really difficult, loaded times like this, to stay focused so that we might do good in the world?
Well, hello, everybody. It's great to be in Denver, to be back. Thank you so very much, and wonderful to be with both of my friends. I've known Dr. Tyler since we were in college, so don't ask him anything. And
I'm going to run for Senate, then I'll let them know what.
I'm so glad that Dr. Mosby Tyler saved you. And it's wonderful to be at Shorter AME, and I'm very grateful that my colleague and my friend and brother, who has been mayor, governor, and now senator. That's a serious public servant. Let's hear it again for Senator John Hickenlooper. Good to see you, brother. Thank you. This is a wonderful time, and it's a tough time. It's a difficult moment in our country, and but we've seen tough times before. We've had to struggle before. And I entitled my book, A Way Out of No Way. That's a phrase that's deep in the culture of the black church. You're not in the black church more than 20 minutes before somebody says, our God makes a way out of no way. It's a phrase born of travail and struggle and hoping against hope and keeping the faith. And so I know that these are difficult times, these are dark times, but the scripture says that the light shines in the darkness. Right? I like that, because it's not that it's dark, but the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness overcometh it not. And so we have to try to find ways to be that light. That's what my ministry and service has been all about. That's what the work of this church has been about for a long time.
Thank you, Senator. Question for you. I want to just move right into this issue of voter suppression. I I was having a conversation with someone and kind of listing a lot of the ways in which many states have structured what we call voter suppression. And the question is always, how and will we be able to overcome those types of systems in order to win, or at least not, even if we don't win, but able to at least express our opinions and votes at the voting box. And we know that your race may be one of those races where everyone needs to have the right to vote. Is it hopeless? Is it a hurdle that we can't climb? What is it?
No, it's not hopeless. I'm sitting here. Look at this. Not hopeless. I wouldn't be sitting here. So I appreciate you raising that issue, because I happen to think that there is no issue that we in the Senate could be working on that's more important than voting rights. And hear me out. Hear why I say this. And because I'm sure somebody will say, what about this issue or that issue? Climate change is an existential threat. We're talking about the planet. But here's why I say voting rights, there's no issue more important than that, because the democracy itself is the framework in which we get to fight for everything else we care about. The fight against climate change to create a sustainable community is not possible if you don't have a democracy. And if moneyed interests can flood the voices of ordinary people out of their democracy and replace it with dark money. So right now there is a disconnect between what the majority of Americans want on a whole range of issues and the progress that we've been able to achieve so far. And so in a sense, so for me, the issue is the democracy. And we have to make sure that the democracy can deliver. So that's why I've fought so hard for this. I've been inspired by people like John Lewis.
Absolutely.
I was his pastor, but I'm very clear he was the mentor, I was the mentee. And I often think about a young John Lewis crossing that Edmund Pettus Bridge with a trench coat on and a backpack, he and Hosea Williams. And here's why people like you and I have no right to give up. What made a 19-year-old John Lewis think that he could cross an Edmund Pettus Bridge and that bridge could be a bridge to the future?
Yes, sir.
I don't know what he was thinking when he was crossing that bridge. But here's what I know he wasn't thinking. I'm sure he wasn't thinking that one day I'm going to be the recipient of the Presidential Medal of Freedom. He wasn't thinking that at the time of my death, 3 American presidents were going to show up in the church where Martin Luther King Jr. served, Democrats and Republicans, and celebrate my life. What I'm saying is he had no real reason to think that he could win. We look back at the civil rights movement and we talk about its success as if it were inevitable. These were improbable victories, quite improbable.
Yes, sir.
I think that day he was probably just trying to stay alive. And alive to fight another day and maybe pass it on to the next. And so what I'm saying is, as a kid who was born after the civil rights movement, a year after Dr. King's death, I don't have any right to give up, because I stand on the shoulders of John Lewis, but not only John Lewis, Fannie Lou Hamer, who said, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired of Viola Luiso, a white woman who came all the way down, I believe, from Michigan to fight in the deep, dark South in those days and lost her life, of Schwerner and Cheney and Goodman, 2 Jews and an African American who lost their lives and kept fighting for what's right. So we're in a struggle, and we're going to keep fighting. Now, here is and call me a glass half full kind of guy. Here's the gleam of light. People who know they can win the fight don't engage in voter suppression. Our adversaries are engaged in voter suppression because they know the momentum is with us. They know that the momentum is with us. So we've been working on this for years in Georgia. Long before I decided to run for the Senate or knew I would ever run for anything, I've been engaged in registering people to vote. I've registered hundreds of thousands of Georgians to vote before I ran. As chair of the New Georgia Project, we register people regularly in my church because I actually think that a vote is a kind of prayer for the world we desire for ourselves and our children. And I believe that democracy is the political enactment of a spiritual idea. This notion that all of us have within us a spark of the divine. We have value. And therefore, we ought to have a say in the direction of the country and our destiny within it. So we didn't get those two bills passed. John and I fought really hard, Senator Hickenlooper and Senator Bennett and we fought hard to get that done. All 50 Democrats were on the bill. And here's what you need to do, and thank you for helping me, Colorado. Help send me back to this seat. Let's get 2 more Democrats and let's get it done.
That was a mic drop moment. I love that. Senator, tell us a little bit about legislation, bills, things that got passed, things that almost got passed that you're most proud of in your work as a senator.
Wow. And this may sound corny, but I'm just being honest here. I still do, a year and a half into this job, I still wake up regularly and have to pinch myself because I can't believe I get to do this work. As tough as it is, to have the people of your state say they want you to represent them and their children and their parents at the highest forms of the highest levels of the American government is an amazing honor. And particularly for somebody like me who caught the bug, and you got it and you got it, that kind of social change bug early on, it's contagious. It's a terrible affliction. Because even when you lose, you can't help it. Any of y'all got the bug? Any of y'all got that bug? It's, you know, it's a terrible, you just like, I'm gonna make the world or some corner of the world better. And my parents passed that on to me, and I got it in the church. It's really an expression of my faith. So it's an amazing thing to be a United States Senator because we did the unimaginable. Georgia sent in one fell swoop at a moment where we're struggling with division. Georgia sent its first black senator and its first Jewish senator to the United States Senate. So I'm just so glad that Georgia's on everybody's mind these days. And you know, I especially love going up, you know, to New York and places like that. You know, New Yorkers are very chauvinistic about this is New York. I love going there, places like that, and reminding them that Georgia saved New York. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
So, but because we won, we were able to pass the American Rescue Plan, which began to get this virus under control. We're still working, we're still not there, but we're all gathered in this house this morning, vaxxed and boosted. Life is better, right? We're getting this under control. We put shots in people's arms. We supported our municipal governments so that they didn't have to lay off firefighters and police officers. In the American Rescue Plan, we helped farmers. I had a bill in that plan where we provided $5 billion of debt relief to farmers of color because of decades of discrimination that was exacerbated by the pandemic. So it was the history of this and in recent times. So black farmers at the turn of the 20th century were about 14%, I think, of farmers, and now they're like 2%, unable to stay in the business. And he said, well, that was a long time ago. Well, when the pandemic relief was provided through the CARES Act, black farmers got 0.1% of the aid. So we provided the $5 billion. We passed a bill that would provide $5 billion of debt relief. Sadly, before we could get the money out of the door, we were tied up in court, so they haven't gotten it yet. But we'll keep fighting the good fight. And then there was another thing in the American Rescue Plan. We passed the single largest tax cut for middle and working class families in American history. It's called the Expanded Child Tax Credit. It provides support to 97% of families with children. On average, $300 per child per month. We weren't able to extend it. I would have wanted to make it permanent, but we did do it for 6 months. We cut child poverty 50%. Now that's just one provision in the bill. We passed a bipartisan infrastructure bill, the largest infrastructure bill in a generation. We passed the Jobs and Competition Act, which invests in tech hubs, invests in all of our colleges and universities, invests in our HBCUs that have never gotten their share of research and development dollars, because scientists and smart people are on campuses of Morehouse and Tuskegee as well, right? And we continue to do the work. The day we passed the American Rescue Plan, to give you a sense of the scope of what we were able to achieve in spite of our frustrations, Senator Sherrod Brown of Ohio called me the day we passed the bill. He said, Raphael, I want to thank you for winning. He's in his third term in the Senate. He said, today is the best day of my career. Now, I felt a little bad because it was his third term. It was my third month. And we had already passed a bill with such far-reaching implications that Sherrod Brown said it was the best day of his career. So we'll continue to build on that. Listen, folks, 2 years of a pandemic, over 1 million Americans have died. We were forced out of our houses of worship. I have 2 small children. One day you can go to school, the next day you can't. This has been a long, hard slog. And people feel the pain as a result of that. There's a way in which I think all of us are going through a kind of PTSD. I think we're traumatized. How could we not? And I don't think we've taken full stock of it, because if you slow down and really let it settle in, it might paralyze you. So I think we just kind of keep moving. And it'll probably be years later. Some of the help, I got psychologists and folks who could talk about this better than me. It'll probably be years later before we come to terms with what has happened to us and our children, which is why one of the bills that I have pushed forward is actually a series of bills that provides mental health resources to the children in our schools where there are not enough therapists and counselors. So here, what I'm saying to you is we understandably so, we're going through a kind of trauma. And I just the pastor in me wants to ask you, even connect with other folk, check in with each other, check in with yourself. But let us do our best not to give in to the despair, to the shadows. Sometimes it's one day at a time. And because we're under so much trauma, I think even with the amazing things we've gotten done, people don't always feel it because of the depth. A once-in-a-century pandemic that created an economic turn down, the likes of which we haven't seen in our lifetime, and now a war in Ukraine, supply chain issues where mamas and daddies are trying to figure out how to get baby formula. That's a lot. And the temptation in the midst of that is to turn on each other rather than toward each other. Meanwhile, there are demagogues who are trying to exploit those fault lines that are already there, and we have to resist them and say that we're one country, one people, and we rise only when we rise together, when everybody has a chance, when every child has access to a good quality education. You know, our seniors don't have to choose between groceries and prescription drugs. That's what I'm fighting for every single day, and as hard as it is, I still pinch myself because I feel so incredibly blessed that I get to be in the fight. Even when it feels like you're not winning, take a moment and thank God that you get to be in the fight.
A few years back, you and I got arrested.
We went to jail, yo.
Yes, he went to jail. In the lobby, he said, that's right. In the lobby, we got arrested for trying to save health care in the lobby of the Senate. Now you sit in the well of the Senate. My question is, there are those who say it's very difficult to be an activist in the lobby of the Senate and a politician in the well of the Senate. How do you balance the two? And does it make sense?
Timothy Tyler is my friend. But right now I feel like he just cussed me out.
Can I fix it for you?
He had the nerve to call me a politician.
A politician.
Listen. So yesterday, and it's an adjustment for me to be in strange places and people recognize me. So yesterday I was standing in the airport and the woman recognized my face, but she didn't know who I was. She said, "Are you a politician?" I said, "I hope not. I am in office, but I'm trying my best never to become a politician." That's why I go home to preach every weekend. I'm afraid I might become a politician. So, no, but it's a great question. Inside, outside, and he's right. I do have a rap sheet. I've gotten arrested a couple of times, a few times as I think about it. But yeah, 2017, we were at the United States Capitol, in the rotunda of the Capitol, and we were fighting to get Medicaid expansion in states like Georgia. They were undermining the Affordable Care Act at the federal level. They were passing, do you remember, a $1.9 trillion tax cut, which involved giving a tax cut to those who needed the least and taking resources from those who needed the most. So we went to the rotunda and we began to speak out as they were passing that budget. And we began to say that a budget is not just a fiscal document, it's a moral document. It says who you think matters and who doesn't. And I remember saying that day that if this budget were an EKG, it would suggest that America has a heart problem. And so we've come to the Capitol to perform moral surgery on a country that needs it in this moment. And I remember the Capitol Police came. By the way, they were very polite, they were very professional, they didn't rough us up. And but they said, look, you can't sing and pray in the rotunda of the Capitol. I thought to myself, somebody needs to sing and pray. And they said, well, Reverend, we'll give you 3 warnings. You remember that? They said, we'll tell you 3 times to disperse, and if you don't disperse after the 3rd time, and we were there, Christian pastors, Hindu, Jewish, we were all there. And they said, if you don't move after the 3rd time, you'll be arrested. What they didn't understand is that we had already been arrested. That our mind and our imagination had been arrested by this idea that health care is a human right.
Absolutely.
And it is certainly something the richest nation on the planet can provide to all of its citizens. So it's hard to arrest somebody who's already been arrested. So they listened to my speech and hauled us right on off to central booking. But nowadays, you're right. My office is right down the hall from the rotunda where I was arrested.
Yes.
And the Capitol Police who escorted me to central booking now escort me to my office. Dr. King used to say that the moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends toward justice. That day we were there protesting and trying to fight for Medicaid. I've since gotten elected to the Senate. And now I write Medicaid legislation. When we passed the American Rescue Plan, because Georgia flipped the Senate, I was able to convince the other members of my caucus to put in billions of dollars to further incentivize Georgia and the 11 other non-expansion states to expand Medicaid. So that was put in the American Rescue Plan. And then, of course, Georgia, still fighting the political fights of a decade ago, still refusing to expand Medicaid, left those in its millions of dollars on the table, 600,000 Georgians in the Medicaid gap. So I wrote another law called the Medicaid Saves Lives Act, which would allow people in non-expansion states to still access the Medicaid expansion through a federal look-alike program. So yeah, I've moved from agitator to legislator, translating my protests into public policy. I'm now on the inside, but I try to hang out with God's troublemakers so that I don't ever lose my fire.
Thank you. That's a perfect segue into your book. I got a chance to read your book yesterday. I got it yesterday. I read it yesterday. Here we are. I loved it.
She's a speed reader, you know.
Well, I hope that everyone that purchased the book, and if you are going to purchase the book, enjoys it in the way that I did. There's just so much to unpack in it. But what you just said is an important thing, how you moved from agitator to legislator. And one of the conversations we had earlier is we tend to compartmentalize that. You're either this or you're that. And in the book, I realized that there is a way to be both and to have some essence of both in all that you do. I'm really interested in you talking about that a little bit. How does agitator, legislator show up in you? But what inspired you to even write the book?
Well, I've been in the fight for quite some time. I was working on these issues long before I came to the Senate. Health care, voting rights, criminal justice reform, climate change. I've been working on these issues for years, child poverty. And here was an opportunity to tell the story and to talk about what I've learned. And it's really, the book in many ways, a way out of no way. It's my story, but hopefully it's a lens into the American story. And the book is a recognition that I didn't spring ex nihilo. Nice little seminary term, right? Latin. Out of nothing. I didn't come out of nowhere. I'm part of a moral tradition. Martin Luther King Jr., a great expression of that tradition, who's inspired me, but then my own parents, who I talk about in the book. And so I wrote the book to point to the arc of our American history. to remind myself, even as I talk to others, that 2 years ago, my now 84-year-old mother, who grew up in Waycross, Georgia, y'all know where that is? Waycross, Georgia. She grew up as a black kid in the South in the 1950s, picking somebody else's cotton, picking somebody else's tobacco. But because this is America, she got a chance to pick her youngest son to be a United States Senator. Yeah. The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. And I hope that we'll keep bending that arc. Because when we fight, we win.
Senator, in your book, and I remember this time period, you talk about going to Douglas Memorial. Is that right? Douglas Memorial. And in it, you talk about how you are scheduled to preach at Douglas Memorial, and your voice, and you lose much of your voice. And you, in your book, you talk about how that was a reminder from God. You saw it as a reminder from God about how you use your voice. Could you talk about that a little bit?
So, in the African Methodist Episcopal Church and other Methodist churches and various other traditions, the bishop sends you to the church. They assign you to a parish. I'm Baptist, and in our tradition and in other Congregationalist traditions, UCC, for example, the church is the governing authority. So pastors are hired, elected by the local congregation. And so I was candidating for my first church. And, you know, they look you up and down and kick the tires. So this is my first time running for a political office, but I've been a candidate before. And so my first church was in Baltimore, Maryland. And the night I was supposed to go and preach at another church so that the search committee could go over and then hear me and decide whether or not to recommend me to the congregation, something happened to me that almost never happens. Almost never happens. But of all times, when I have to preach before a search committee that I'm hoping will elect me to my first church, I almost completely lost my voice. Got something out in my throat, and literally almost to a whisper. And I had to soldier through and preach that night, and I guess they heard enough. And they did recommend me to the church. And for me, it was just a reminder as a faith leader that, look, we bring our best to the game. We bring our best, but ultimately it's not up to us. There's something else at work that's larger than us. The scripture says, not by power nor by might, but by my spirit. And that's the thing that keeps me fighting. I mean, the people during the civil rights movement, again, they had no reason to believe that they could win. You don't face down dogs and water hoses and police officers with billy clubs just because you read Nietzsche or Niebuhr or anybody. Like, for me, that movement was it was a kind of revival, and the folks who were to move, they will testify to that. So it is that sense that keeps me pushing. I don't, you know, that's what works for me. That keeps me moving. And the recognition that you really discover your life by giving your life over to a cause and an idea that's larger than you. Anybody who's wrapped up in him or herself is a very small package. And all of us need to find a project in our lifetime that's larger than our lifetime. If you're engaged right now in a life project that you can finish in your lifetime, your life project is too small. Find a life project that's larger and longer than your lifetime, that's so lofty and so big, you're going to have to pass it on to the next generation.
You've already given us so much wisdom and things to think about, even without the audience having read the book. But if you go back and reflect on the meaning of the things that you wrote about, what are a couple of things that you would want the audience to hear you say about your memoir?
The title, A Way Out of Nowhere, captures it all. Again, it's a saying that's deep in the church, but the other part of that saying that we don't say explicitly because we just know it, it's really not just that God makes a way out of nowhere. It's really as we are on our way, God makes a way out of no way. Like, we have to get moving. Even when we're not completely clear about the direction, start walking in the direction that you intend to go. And I think I mean that individually, and I mean that collectively. Here, get my good side here now. So that's the other thing that's the other thing. Listen, that gets me through. Laughter. Walter Kerr said that laughter is not the gaiety of things, it is the grown made gay. So I grew up in a poor family, but I feel like I hit the jackpot because I had two great parents, and even if that's not your story, that's not the end of the story. But I had two great parents, big family. We were short on money, but we were long on faith and hope, and there was always laughter in my home. So even in these dark times, serious times, never take yourself too seriously. It'll give you a stroke, a heart attack. Don't take yourself too seriously. And I see John Lewis in those last days dancing to the song, I'm Happy. Yeah. Stay happy and keep fighting.
I feel privileged that you were we had a chance to talk while you were writing this memoir. Now, you told me that there was a whole chapter about me, but it didn't make... So please be on the lookout for the second memoir, and I will be in...
It's in footnote 546.
But on a serious note, you talk about your children, and you talk about the recent activity on the Supreme Court. I know one of your struggles or one of your issues was how to describe both the pain and the joy in your life. Can you just talk about your children for a minute?
They are the two brightest stars in my universe, and my two mini bosses. Chloe is 5 and Caleb is 3.5. I'm an older dad. Some days I do the math, thinking about how old I'm going to be when I dropped them off to college. But my dad was an older dad, even older than, I'm 52. My dad was 52 when I was born. But anyway, my children are everything to me. They're everything. That's job one. And the hardest part of doing this job is when I'm away from them, but I do this job because of them. The day we confirmed Ketanji Brown Jackson to the Supreme Court, which wouldn't have happened had I not won. And it didn't even occur to me until I was sitting in the judiciary hearing, because I worked really hard never to make it about me. But I have to acknowledge that it wouldn't have happened had I not won. And there was no way for me to do that, even as I was struggling about whether I would even run. Because I didn't set out to be a politician. I'm a pastor who serves in the Senate. But the day we confirmed Ketanji Brown Jackson to the Supreme Court, I happened to be standing near the presiding officer's desk, me and Cory Booker. And the vice president was in the chair that day because it was such a historic moment. And she was there. The whole chamber was full, which is rare. As Senator Hickenlooper will tell you, it's rare that we're actually all in the chamber. But it was a historic moment. The whole country was watching, and Senator Booker and I were standing near the vice president at one point when we were waiting for the vote. And she said, what a historic moment. You guys ought to take the time to write a letter to somebody who's on your mind in this very moment. She said, I'll tell you what, I'll give you a piece of paper. We're standing there. She hands each of us a piece of paper, but not just any piece of paper. I was flabbergasted. I looked down. It was the letterhead of the Vice President of the United States. So I said, who am I going to write a letter to on the letterhead of the Vice President of the United States? I didn't have to think long. So I sat down almost immediately, and I wrote a note. I said, Dear Chloe, my 5-year-old daughter, today we confirm to the United States Supreme Court Ketanji Brown Jackson. In the long history of our country, I said, she is the first Supreme Court justice who looks like you with hair like yours.
Yes.
As we were voting, a friend of mine, the Vice President of the United States, suggested that I write a note. By the way, she's the first vice president in the long history of our country who looks like you with hair like yours. So I wrote this note to say that you can achieve, you can be whatever you decide to be. Love, Dad. So that was my note. My daughter's 5 years old. I read it to her. She was not impressed. She was barely listening to me as I read it over FaceTime that night.
Sort of how they treat me on Sunday morning when I'm preaching.
Children, keep you humble. She'll understand it better, as we say, by and by. But I've been thinking about that in the weeks since then. And I've come to the conclusion that legislation at the end of the day is a letter to our children. That's how we ought to be thinking about it. Whether we're talking about climate change or jobs or health care, criminal justice reform, equity, poverty. Legislation is a letter to our children. And before we decide which way to vote or what to do, about 19 babies slaughtered in a classroom. The mamas and daddies hugged their children on what should have been a normal school day. Said, I'll see you later. Not knowing that would be the very last time that they would see their children. 19 babies. And they're 2 teachers. So I don't know how much we're going to get done on this in the next few days. I do know that it's not going to be enough, sadly. But I hope we'll get something done, that we'll find a way to connect with the 90% of the American public that believes we ought to do universal background checks, that we'll deal with red flag laws. We're not going to do everything. I understand. I've seen enough to know we're not going to get it all done, and we're not going to agree on everything. But we have to do something. And what I will be saying to my colleagues is, this is a letter to our children. And so we ought to be asking ourselves what we want that letter to say. So I told my 5-year-old daughter she can be anything she wants to be. But as a black man in America, I still do recognize how complicated that statement is. What I said to my daughter is not untrue, but as we say about relationships, is complicated. And my job and our job, through the work we would do together as an American public, is to help all of us to keep the basic promises that we all make to our children.
Dr. Donita, you get the last question.
Yes, well, it's not really a question, it's a request. I think the audience would love to hear you read your favorite excerpt from your book. I'm sure you have a favorite.
I don't know that I have a favorite. Can I read a little bit? All right. All right. So I don't know that I have a favorite, but I told you I had an older father. I just adore my parents. My dad's gone on to glory. My mom is still with us. But I know I stand on the foundation that they built. So let me share with you a little bit about my dad and about my family story. I'm on page, well, I'll let you find it. You're going to read the book later, right? So, yeah, rather than read along, maybe just listen. Born in 1917, Jonathan Warnock was the youngest of Samuel and Carrie Warnock's 4 children. He was the baby of the family, yet his 2 older brothers and sister nicknamed him Father because he always seemed older than his years. He was just 4 years old when his family left their home in rural Burke County, Georgia, and relocated to Savannah. His paternal grandfather, Madison Warnock, owned a farm in Burke County, and Samuel and Carrie lived and worked on the farm. At Carrie's insistence, they left for Savannah, a city that seemed to offer more autonomy and the opportunity for a better life. As a young man, Dad was drafted in the US Army during World War II and served about a year, all stateside. He experienced firsthand the indignities of that era's black military men who served their country dutifully at a defining time in its history, yet were treated as second-class citizens, particularly in the segregated South. Dad headed back home to Savannah on a public bus. He was dressed proudly in his Army uniform as the bus rolled through town, pulled to a stop, and began filling with new passengers. The white bus driver pointed at my father and ordered him to get up and move farther back so a white teenager could sit. To the white driver and passengers, the skin he was wearing was more consequential than the US Army uniform he was wearing. Dad knew the grave consequences a black man could face if he dared to disobey. Black men and boys had been dragged from their homes and lynched for less. He obliged, but never forgot. Inspired in part by his own internal entrepreneurial drive, but also by his refusal to suffer the everyday dignities and economic vulnerabilities of working for people who refused to acknowledge his humanity in the Jim Crow South, Dad always worked for himself. He had a fierce work ethic, and his hauling business sometimes transported produce, peaches, apples, watermelons, or a load of glass, or junk cars to area markets or factories. By the early 1960s, he was divorced with a teenage son, Jonathan Emanuel, who was old enough to help in the business. The two of them were transporting a load of glass in the truck late one rainy evening with two other teen boys whom Dad had enlisted to assist. Suddenly, a car appeared out of nowhere on the rural Georgia highway and rear-ended Dad's truck. The car slammed hard into the truck and skidded partly underneath its chassis. When Dad and his stunned passengers climbed out of their vehicle, they saw blood and glass everywhere. They also saw a horrific scene inside the car, where the driver, a young white man, had been decapitated. The passenger, another young white man, had been thrown from the vehicle but miraculously survived the crash. White residents of the area heard the commotion and began gathering at the dreadful scene. Shattered lives and shards of glass spilled all over that Georgia rural highway. Within minutes, the sheriff, also white, arrived, lights flashing and sirens blaring. As Dad looked into the sea of white faces, a sense of foreboding filled him. Saddened by what had just happened, and terrified by what appeared on the verge of happening, Dad inched close to his boys and whispered that they had to stick together. They might have to fight for their lives. Dad began to pray. Not the long or eloquent prayer of a Sunday morning preacher, but the hushed sounds and urgent pleas of a man in trouble, as they would sometimes do in those late night prayer services in the holiness church tradition in which I was raised. Dad simply called on the name of Jesus repeatedly, silently, passionately. The sheriff approached and in his thick Georgia drawl questioned Dad and his passengers about the accident. Then, after taking his time to survey the scene, the sheriff turned to Dad with an unexpected question. "You boys need a ride home?" In shock, Dad and the teenagers glanced back and forth at one another. The sheriff added that he'd warned the young men in the car multiple times about driving drunk and flying so recklessly up and down those rural back roads. This wasn't the reaction Dad expected in this era, with a group of black men left to explain the death of a young white man and the injury of another. But Dad and his helpers all lived to tell the story. And tell it, Dad did. Over and over in his sermons, recounting God's grace and mercy. After recounting the story, he would often recite the scripture that says, "The name of the Lord is a strong tower. The righteous run into it and are safe." Dad had entered parish ministry in his 40s, eventually becoming the senior pastor of Triumph the Church and Kingdom of God in Christ. My mother joined the congregation when she returned to Savannah after a failed marriage. She had been about 18 years old when she first made her way to Savannah and lived with an aunt who was a holiness preacher. In time, Mom got married, moved for a few years to Florida, and started her own family. But the marriage didn't last, and when she moved back to Savannah, her new pastor was divorced with 4 children, a son and 3 daughters. Mom was 21 years younger, also divorced, and the mother of 6 children, 5 sons and a daughter. One evening after service, one of the church mothers, a position of authority and reverence, amen, somebody, that is bestowed on the most senior women of the congregation, told my father that a young lady from the church needed a ride home. The young lady was my mom. The two of them talked during the ride and realized that they had much in common despite the obvious age difference. A friendship began blossoming, and on one occasion when the pastor drove his new friend home, she invited him inside. He marveled over how this single mother managed to keep her home so spotless, well organized, and orderly while raising 6 children there. He had an idea and politely excused himself. "I'll be right back," he said, and left briefly. He returned a short time later with a takeout dinner for Mom and her children. A thoughtful gesture immediately won over the children, especially Jeffrey, the big eater of the family. That was the first of many dates, often with all 6 of the young mother's children in tow. The pastor would come by in his burgundy station wagon and they'd all climb in for a ride to River Street, a walk down its cobblestone way lined by little shops. Then a stop on the way back home at the local Dairy Queen. The couple soon fell in love and got married and blended their families into one. I entered the world on July 23rd, 1969, the 11th child in our big family. My father was thrilled that God had blessed him with another son at 52 years old. He believed in the power of words and put much thought into my name. He chose Raphael, whom people of faith believe was an archangel and healer, thus the Hebrew meaning, the Lord heals. For my middle name, he picked Gamaliel, a wise Jewish teacher of the law, who mentored the Apostle Paul and in a critical moment defended the apostles against persecution. The name means gift from God. I was the baby of the family for less than a year when just 10 days short of that mark, my sister Valencia Renee, number 12, came along. The two of us were raised as close as twins, and in everybody's eyes, we were a unit, nicknamed Ray and Nay, the babies. We were post-civil rights movement babies, born in the years following the assassinations of Dr. King and Robert Kennedy and the killing of 3 black students at South Carolina State and Orangeburg. We were born amid the chaos of Vietnam War protests, a burgeoning black power movement, and a nation still reckoning with the complexity of its own self-understanding. Conceived in liberty, expanded through genocide, built by slaves. There was still so far to go, but we reaped the benefits of the movement, of paths cleared, doors kicked open, and a country that was coming to grips with the ugliest parts of its past and deciding that we the people could be better. Jim Crow with its discriminatory policies and practices was receding to the dream, the beloved community that recognizes the intrinsic worth of every human being, values love over hate, and defends the right of every American to justice and equality. A backlash against the social justice demands of the civil rights movement was also already afoot, and the fight to realize the dream continues today. I never drank from a colored water fountain, used a colored restroom, or attended a school assigned by the color of my skin. I was never forced to give up my seat on the bus to a white passenger, as my father had been while dressed in his military uniform on that shameful day. While he told his children the story, Dad never seemed bitter. It was at his church that I learned to recite the Pledge of Allegiance. In Dad, I saw a true patriot who loved his country despite its flaws, a man who never lost faith that his country could someday find a way to live up to its ideals.
Raphael, Gamaliel, Warnock, we are glad that you are our friend. We're glad you came to Denver. We're glad you're in the United States Senate. And it does not yet appear what you shall be. Come on, help me to thank Senator
Thank you so much.
Warnock.
Thank you.
All right, folks. Well, thank you for being with us today as we have enjoyed that wonderful presentation from Senator Warnock. Again, Senator Warnock, if you were looking for the book, the name of the book is A Way Out of No Way by Senator Raphael Warnock. And we've been putting the link in the chat. You can buy that on any bookstore that you wish to find. It's out now. And if you're interested to support Senator Warnock's campaign, you may visit www.warnockforgeorgia.com. I'm going to leave that up for a second. All money is good money, even if you're not in Georgia. And if you have friends in Georgia, make sure you tell them to go vote. And we'd like to announce that Senator Warnock will be at the General Board. On Tuesday morning at June 28th, Senator Warnock will be at the General Board for the Turner Theological Seminary Alumni Breakfast. Now, the tickets are sold out online, so you will need to call the Turner Seminary office to get information for that. So the tickets are sold out online, and you will need to call Turner Seminary. And we've, again, put that information in the email. If you're watching this broadcast, you saw the email. But if you call Turner, you can see, and there should be a few more tickets that are available, but you have to call them if you're going to be in Atlanta. Well, again, we thank you for watching this broadcast. We are indeed excited for what will go on this week, both in the AME Church, and also we encourage you to check out our coverage of the CME General Conference. And tomorrow we will have the TCR news email coming out. You don't want to miss it. So that's it for today. Thank you all for watching. God bless you and enjoy your Sunday.